Hi, everybody. Andrew Champagne here alongside JD Fox for this week's edition of Champagne and JD. If you're just tuning in for the first time, first of all, welcome. We're really excited to bring this to you every week. If you like what you see, hit that subscribe button down there to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. It's been great producing this stuff for the community. We're seeing a lot of our view counts go up with some of the guests that we're having. It's been a lot of fun. We've been hard at work trying to figure out some more guests to have on this show. We think you'll like what we have coming up over the coming weeks and months, especially with racing restarting, as it were. Though, I got to tell you, JD, Belmont sort of blew up the world earlier this week with their announcement about the Belmont Stakes, and I think it's pretty funny that on the side of the screen here you have several questions that I feel we really need to tackle before we go any further, before we talk about a really good card at Flemington on Friday night. So, JD, if you would like to play the person that needs everything explained to them in painstaking detail, go right ahead.
Hey, I thought the card on Wednesday night at Belmont Park in Australia was great. I showed you a picture, that scenic view they have at the 7 furlong start with the river running behind the course. One of the most beautiful views in all of horse racing.
JD?
That's not what we're talking about here?
Wrong country, buddy.
Hey, Australia has a Belmont Park too.
Thank you for clearing that up to the people watching that we've just tried to beg to subscribe that had no idea what you were talking about and summarily left the show. Anyway, the Belmont Stakes, as we all know, will not be contested at 1.5 miles this year. It will be contested later in June at the distance of 1.1 miles. Conspiracy theories have abounded. Got to tell you guys on Twitter, really disappointed with some of the takes that I've seen. Just shows a misunderstanding of a lot of different angles. JD, we can talk a little bit about this. For me, this was a situation where every option the New York Racing Association had was a bad one. Every single one. There were no good ones. This, by no means, is something anybody wanted. Nobody wants the Belmont Stakes run at 1.5 miles that seriously cares about the future of this game. If you shorten the Belmont Stakes on a yearly basis, it winds up being a case where the breed gets weaker. It winds up being a situation where stamina, which already isn't valued as much as it should be, is valued even less. But in the case of what's happening right now, as a one-year act of God type exemption, I'm surprisingly fine with it. I understand people not being happy. I understand some people saying this year's Belmont isn't really the Belmont. This year's Triple Crown isn't really the Triple Crown. And I agree with that to a point. My thing, JD, is if some horse sweeps the Belmont, the Kentucky Derby, and the Preakness this year, we do not call them the Triple Crown winner. We call them the COVID Crown winner. Can I get you to buy in on this?
I think that's a good idea, and I think that's better than the asterisk or anything that people are talking about. I have a much simpler question to start. Is this as big of a deal if Bob Baffert doesn't come out 3 weeks ago and says, hey, at 1.1 miles I'd run some horses at the Belmont, but not at 1.5 miles at that point in when it's going to likely be run? Is this as big of a deal if Baffert doesn't kind of call his shot and make it sound like everybody was, bending backwards for his benefit, which was the immediate joke that preceded that conversation?
To 80% of the racing fan base that's out there, I say no. I think a lot of the people that were really ticked off about that are people that are already putting in a lot of money at the windows. And yes, you can't afford to tick off those people. And it wasn't a great look. Having said that, I have to think, or at least I want to think, that one trainer doesn't have the ability to influence that kind of a decision. If Bob Baffert truly does have that kind of power, this is where I make the point. Please, Bob Baffert, please do not send your enforcers and your hired guns at us. We like you. We like your horses. Please run your horses in big spots. Please, 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 please. Anyway, on a serious note, no, I don't think that had as big of an effect as some other people think that it might have. And again, this is a decision that a lot of people are not going to like for various reasons. There were some people that wanted the Belmont to be run at 1.5 miles with no changes. Okay, you do that, you have a 5-horse field, because that's how many horses are going to run in this thing. There are some people that wanted the Belmont pushed later in the year, maybe to October, to both preserve the distance and the order of the Triple Crown. Okay, you do that. Maybe the Derby or Preakness winner bypasses the Belmont to train up to the Breeders' Cup Classic, or even worse, the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Try to figure out a situation where a horse that would have been a major contender in the Belmont bypasses it for the freaking Dirt Mile. That's the scenario that would have opened up, and I guarantee you that would have happened with at least one 3-year-old that probably would have been about 10, 12 to 1 in the Belmont, instead being those same odds in the Breeders' Cup freaking Dirt Mile. Again, this is something I'm going to stress. No good options.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to, and what we have to realize. And this is all of sports right now. There are a lot of people that are talking about baseball and how they can restart the baseball season. And I heard several things this week and from varying sources, so I don't feel like I have to name one, that basically said baseball has a whole lot of ideas on the table. And they are the first to admit none of them are particularly good. And that's kind of where we're at in this, mid-COVID situation, is when it comes to sports, when it comes to horse racing, none of the options are good. Having all of these big races without spectators, that's not good, but it's what has to happen. But there's other things that, we need to say, hey, for these television contracts, I don't hear a lot of people mentioning that. I hear a lot of people bickering about other things about television contracts. But for these television contracts, these big races have to happen, or we're diminishing the value of the sport.
Yep.
So we have to figure out the best way, in a logical sense, for them to take place. Now, did we, coming into this year, think that, hey, we're going to have a later run Triple Crown race potentially be a pseudo qualifying race potentially for the Kentucky Derby? No. Is it going to happen that way? We're not sure at this point, but the likelihood sure seems to be that we could see really a case where the Derby is going to be the withered down field, and we're going to see larger fields in the Belmont, which is also maybe not a negative thing when you come to think about everything that's happening here. It's new, it's different, and sometimes new and different in a tough situation is the best way to go.
Now, the one thing that I will say before we move on to the ordering of this situation is, back when I said, if it is a one-time thing as an act of God type instance, I'm fine with it. Here's what I'm afraid of, JD. If they do this, say the Belmont attracts a field of 16 runners, which it likely will. Even better, let's assume the Belmont Stakes gets split because it draws a whole bunch of entrants. At some point, there is going to be someone, ideally someone who is very high up in the food chain, someone with a lot of money and a lot of influence and a very loud voice on social media saying, oh, this worked. Let's shorten the Belmont permanently. No, absolutely not. No. And there are voices out there that are saying we need to modify the Triple Crown for this reason or that reason, whatever. One of those voices being Barry Irwin, who won the Kentucky Derby with Animal Kingdom. He's been lobbying for this for years. My counter, how about we breed a better horse?
We mentioned that way too much on this show. And it's one of the cool things about, we get to talk about Australia a lot. And we get U.S. studs going to Australia, and we get some pedigrees we're familiar with, but they're mixing and they're breeding in a totally different fashion than what we are in the U.S. currently. It's a fascinating subtopic of this. The other topic I'll mention again on the shortness of the situation is, I think if they do get a field of 16 for a shortened Belmont, I think the draw is going to be the most fascinating thing in the world, because if you guys are not familiar with where that 1.25 mile start is at Belmont, if you're the outside 4 horses and you're running 16 horses, I would say you would probably have about a snowball's chance in hell of winning that race.
Well, we'll see, and it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. Again, the Belmont Stakes, 1 1/8 miles, a 16-horse field being contested in mid-June. It's good that we have these races back in the schedule. It's good that Belmont Park is going to be running, albeit with no fans. There are going to be some pretty big fields with a bunch of horses that haven't run in a while. These are horses that have been stabled at Aqueduct that you'd think would have races run there. they're going to be big fields. And we've seen that at a lot of tracks that have opened up. Churchill Downs is running 12, 14 horse fields on the regular. Gulfstream has big field sizes. Santa Anita has big field sizes with them having opened up. It's going to be fascinating, and we're looking forward to taking a look at that and some of these big races as they come up on the revised stakes calendar. Now, that revised stakes calendar features the Belmont in mid-June, the Kentucky Derby the first Saturday of September, not the first Saturday in May, the first Saturday in September, and the Preakness in October. This, of course, all leading up to the Breeders' Cup Classic in November. Look, I understand that we all want the Triple Crown to be run, Derby, Preakness, Belmont, the same way a lot of people have been used to for decades. The order has been changed a number of times throughout history. Of all the things that we could talk about right now, I don't think the order is that big of a deal. Now, it's not the same series. The demands on a horse are completely different. Instead of worrying about having a horse ready to run 3 times in 5 weeks, you're looking at having a horse peak at 3 separate times of the year. I think it's a completely different challenge for trainers, and I think that's going to be the most fascinating part of it moving forward. I was talking with somebody who noted Bob Baffert having 3-year-olds of varying growth charts, some of whom might be ready now, some of whom might be peaking later in the year, and he mentioned what D. Wayne Lucas did back in the mid-90s, winning legs of the Triple Crown with 2 different horses. It wouldn't shock me if something like that happened again.
Yeah, because we talk about changes in American breeding styles. It's not just the distance, but it's also the durability factor. I mean, how many horses do we have at the top of the 3-year-old level that are running 8, 9 races during a 3-year-old campaign? You're not anymore. And you're going to ask any horse that's going to try to run all 3 legs to do that, because they're probably, given the gap in the races, they're probably going to need not just workouts, they're probably going to need another race somewhere in there. And you're not going to go from June to September without a race and expect to be at peak fitness in September.
Nope. See also the Haskell and the Travers. Those are going to be very interesting to watch. It's also going to be interesting to see what happens with the Gin Dandy at Saratoga. And all of these little 3-year-old races that usually would be grade 3s. Maybe they get the second-rate horses, but you might see some top-rate 3-year-olds potentially ducking out of some of the bigger spots just to get a prep. It's going to be fascinating to watch, and it's going to be pretty cool seeing these trainers have to use a skill that they hadn't really used with this Triple Crown series up to this point. So it's been sort of a crazy week for a lot of different reasons. It's something to where we're all looking for something to take the edge off on Friday night. And JD, I think you and I have found it. There's a very good card at Flemington on Friday night. This will be Australia C in your ADW of choice, and it's a good late pick 4 sequence. The quaddie, it starts in race number 6. There's a stakes race, a benchmark 84, an open handicap, and a 3-year-old open. We've both got tickets, but we've got a couple of matters that we want to touch on first. And I will give the floor to JD because these are a couple of things that he knows a lot more about than I do.
I love Flemington. Let me be the first to say that. It's not just because I found footage that we could license in our open that has Flemington as the only race course that's featured. I went out of my way to find that because that is a beautiful course. That is my favorite race course in all of the world, and we're finally getting to talk about it on this show, and it's great. This is one of the days I always look forward to throughout the year, and that's Living Legends Race Day. Basically in Oakland's Junction, Australia, there's a farm called Living Legends. We have a couple similar farm outfits here in the U.S., but basically your geldings and your older horses, maybe horses that could not make stud happen or post stud. This is the place where all of the legends go, and you can.
It's old friends, basically.
It's old friends. You can go and interact. But the one thing they do with this Living Legends Race Day is they bring a couple of those horses out and treat them like kings for the day. Basically, they get the parade, they get to be in the paddock, they get to interact with fans. Fans get to feed them, whether it's carrots or peppermints or what have you. It's just a fun day for everybody, and that's not happening this year. And the big sadness with that is last year, Might and Power 97 Melbourne Cup. won the double because won the Caulfield Cup, won the Melbourne Cup, one of the most impressive performances of any Australian racehorse ever. Got his parade. He was 25, got out there, big parade, lots of not a lot of dry eyes in the house. We lost Might and Power last month, April 11th. Had emergency surgery for colic and unfortunately did not survive the procedure. So, thoughts there as we lost one of the great Australian horses of all time, and it's just fitting that he did get a swan song. He did get a calling. Flemington, a course that meant a lot in that horse's career. It's kind of sad that we're not seeing that this year. Another thing is this day serves as a big fundraiser for National Jockeys Trust, and they do a lot throughout the year. And for those not familiar with the National Jockeys Trust in Australia, very similar to our permanently disabled jockeys fund here in the U.S. You hear about the PDJF events all throughout the year. They have similar events in Australia. This is one of their big days for that because you get a lot of the retired jockeys out and they sign autographs and they do everything for donations and charity, so missing out on that. So National Jockeys Trust, look it up online. There's ways you can donate now because they do need some donations. This is their big drive normally of the year, and without fans in the stands, it's a different world for everybody. The other thing that makes this particular Living Legends race day something I'm looking so forward to.
You can see the smile just grow on your face. It would light up a room.
Race number 2, the Tom Melbourne Trophy.
Now tell us about Tom Melbourne for those of us who do not know.
Tom Melbourne just retired 2 months ago. Was his last run. He's now at Living Legends. There's a great video Living Legends posted on YouTube earlier this week of Tom Melbourne arriving. This is one of the most beloved horses in Australian history, but there is a certain reason why this Tom Melbourne Trophy is being contested as the second race of the day. And this is a great video from tab.au. And I think you'll figure out why very quickly. So we're going to roll the beautiful bean footage.
Tom Melbourne hits the front. Happy Clapper the outside, running on stoutly. Tom Melbourne, Happy Clapper the outside. Happy Clapper takes the lead in the tramway. Happy Clapper too good for Tom Melbourne. Tom Melbourne's battling, coming through. Tom Melbourne, burning passion, coming through. He's tough, coming through. Just beat Tom Melbourne. Tom Melbourne's darting up the inside. Happy Clapper a length in front. Tom's running on well, but Happy Clapper hanging on in the Epsom. Happy Clapper, he wins his Group 1 today. Happy Clapper beats Tom Melbourne.
Tom Melbourne and Shillelagh go together. Tom Melbourne kicks in the middle and Shillelagh stride at the 100. Shillelagh gets its nose in front of Tom Melbourne. Shillelagh in front, hands and heels. Shillelagh from Tom Melbourne, stick it again.
It's coming through. Tom Melbourne coming through. Rudder pole through the middle. Coming through just in front. Coming through. Beats Tom Melbourne. Kingsguard hits the lead. Edging clear. Tom Melbourne's out late. Too late. Kingsguard beat a desperately unlucky Tom Melbourne. Tom Melbourne, he hasn't got there yet. Coming through. Dixie Blossoms winding up. Lure Remain between them. It's coming through. Dixie Blossom the outside. Tom starting to left. Coming through in front. Coming through. Wins the tramway. Coming through from either Tom Melbourne or Dixie Blossoms.
Tom Melbourne the inside from Egg Tart, but Oregon's Day's in front. The mare draws away. Oregon's Day by a length and a half. Second, Tom Melbourne.
That poor horse. I mean, he's a classy horse. You get a horse that's run second that many times, chances are, as an owner, you're pretty happy.
Those were all group company races. Group 1, Group 2, Group 3 company. And he finished second in all of those.
In fairness, Tom Melbourne did get his nose down a fair amount. He obviously won a lot of money. One of those horses that you don't get to see a whole heck of a lot of, especially here in the States, where if you run second in a Grade 1, there are times where that's seen as a catastrophic problem that necessitates a 6-month layoff. So really cool horse, and as JD mentioned, honored in race number 2 at Flemington on Friday night. Australia C in your ADW of choice. And we mentioned the ADW of choice because we both took a dive into the late quaddie, which starts in race number 6. And, well, to say that we view this sequence differently might be a little bit of an understatement, JD.
Us approach a quaddie differently. Whatever are you talking about, Andrew?
I'm shocked. Let me show you my big shocked face.
Oh goodness! So we're starting off the quaddie with the Hilton Nicholas straight 6. This is the listed handicap. This is the listed handicap that is the main race of the card, and we've got a full 14 horse field. 14 horses, the max that can run at Flemington, and we'll see here the second page of horses. Ananya, the 12 has already been scratched, so it will be a field of 13. We had 14 entries here, no also eligibles, so we will see 13 horses at the moment coming forward. And Andrew, we'll start you off here. You go 4 deep here in leg 1.
Yes, I do go 4 deep, and I know that the horse you like is number 1, Home of the Brave, and you'll tell us a little bit more about that one. I use that horse. Having said that, Home of the Brave is 8 years old. I couldn't have a whole heck of a lot of confidence in that one, despite a lot of things that are in his favor that you'll talk about. So I'll focus on some of the other horses in my ticket. My top selection is actually number 8, Romancer. He's a consistent sort that draws well in this spot. 4 for 6 in the money at Flemington, 4 for 6 in the money at this distance. Seems like makes a lot of sense. I'm also using number 7, Milwaukee, who might take a little bit of money. Rounding into form makes the 4th start off the layoff, and every start has gotten just a little bit better. Further improvement might be good enough for that one to win. And I'm also going to throw in a big price that I got to tell you I liked a little bit more when I thought the going might be firm. It's Going to Rain at Flemington, as JD informed me earlier today. So maybe be a little bit wary of number 4, Rocks the Castle. Having said that, this horse has a lot of early speed, and he might get brave if he's left alone on the front end. 1, 4, 7, and 8 for me in race number 6. This is the Friday feature. It's a good field, JD, and I know you've got a pretty strong opinion.
Yeah, so you mentioned Milwaukee was the favorite, the 7 horse, all week until the weather forecast changed and rain started to fall, and right now we're anticipating at least a heavy 8, if not a heavy 9. So that changes up the handicapping a little bit here, and really we've got to look at horses that have experience in the heavy going. So a horse I want to talk about first is Haunted, who's taking a lot of money now that this race looks like it's going to be contested over a heavy surface. This 5-year-old hasn't seen soft or heavy since a second in the 2019 rendition of the Regal Roller at Caulfield. That was way back in August of last year, about 20 months ago. So second up after a quick spell, it's 2018, sorry. It's 20 months. It's not 2019, 2018 on that last race.
Between friends.
So second up after a quick spell, Speed and Fade in the first back effort over 1,400. Gets back to a sprint distance here. Really like this horse. But my top selection is the one, as you mentioned, Home of the Brave. And that may be a familiar name to some of the North American fans here, because this was an Aidan O'Brien horse for a long time, and this was a top horse in England. So we look at the company here. While it's a listed stake and it's the top race of the day, it's not Group Company. You have to go back to April 29th, 2017 for the last time that this horse was not in Group Company. And that was kind of a comeback race at Leicester after competing in the 2016 Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. That was at Santa Anita. That was won by a horse that is so, it should be at the top of my mind. It's so obviously, it was obviously in that one. Continued in England, tried the Breeders' Cup again in 2017 at Del Mar. This time tried the Turf Mile. Way too long for this horse. 2 trips to the Breeders' Cup, 2 last place finishes. But this is a very classy horse. And he obviously never liked the firm turf of the American circuit. So gets on the heavy that he prefers. 8-year-old at this point, but the form is still solid. Had a third in a Group 3 race at Marfretville last month. Back class, heavy preference. I think it's going to be a tough horse to beat here in this one. So the second race is the Brews Anniversary Plate, which is a benchmark 84 handicap at 1,800 meters. And we do have 3 pages here. We've got our main field drawn in, and then we have our also eligibles, and we do have several scratches to tell you about here as we get to the second group of graphics. The 13 Eugene's Forest already out. The 14 Grinzinger Star is also out. And as we head to the also eligibles, we do our lighter, the 18 is also out on the also eligible list. So we see several of these horses have already drawn in to this race. I'm going to keep this pretty simple in the second leg here in the Brews Anniversary Plate. And I'm going to actually single the 10-horse Aussie Nugget. You'll need the pace setup. I'm going to be the first to admit that. This horse is going to be in last place for the vast majority of these 1,800 meters. But the turn of foot that this horse can turn on, even over a heavy going. Caulfield, benchmark 84, back on May 9th. I will tweet this out. I want everybody to watch this race and watch how much ground this horse makes up and almost gets a win. And, I mean, it's a back marker to begin with, but this was a blown start as a back marker, like a completely blown, like missed the entire field start, almost gets up to win. It's an impressive performance. You might worry about a bounce factor here, but with no other real heavy going preferenced horses in this field, I'm willing to take a chance on somebody that's proven over the heavy and has made up a lot of ground. I think there is enough speed in this race to where Aussie Nugget is worth a single and is the favorite right now in Australia as we record on Thursday night. Andrew, I know you see this race slightly differently as you want to get a little more depth here as you go 5 deep.
I don't know if you noticed, but when you announced your single, I did one of these head turn things and went, wow. Yeah, it's good to know like where I am in relation to where the graphics are. It only took us a couple of months, but I'm starting to get my bearings in doing this whole video thing. Might have a future in this. At any rate, Aussie Nugget is actually my top selection. I thought might be a little more dangerous on firmer going than on heavy going, but if any horse is going to pick up the pieces, it's going to be Aussie Nugget. And I like your single from the standpoint of I need to take a stand somewhere. I'm taking a little bit of a different approach, though. I'm going 5 deep, and I hope we get a little bit of a price home, although if Aussie Nugget gets home, we're both alive. Number 9, Arctic Shock, stretches out in distance, and I think that could help her. She's a stalker, a grinding type of horse, and if they go a little slower up front, I think that's going to help that one. I'm also going to throw in a couple of others that might be bigger prices. Number 11, Super, is a horse that's going to get play and might actually move up over heavy going, but 2 prices to keep an eye on here. Number 5, Savahit, I think is way too big a price on the morning line. Goes second off the bench and has back form from 2019. A return to that form, and I think he's got a pretty good shot. I'll also throw in number 4, Mr. Reckless, goes second off the bench and might inherit the early lead by default. I don't think there's a lot of early speed signed on in this race, and one going 1.25 miles last year, so this 1.1 mile distance, not going to be a problem. I respect Aussie Nugget based on pure talent. If we're running this race solely on pure talent, no other external circumstances, I think Aussie Nugget wins. Having said that, I needed to buy a little bit more coverage, and if we get Savahit or Mr. Reckless home, this quaddie might wind up paying a pretty nice chunk of change, JD.
And that's what we're after here in Australia. Obviously, a lot of depth to these races, but that 20-cent base wager allows you to add in a couple horses in spots where you feel like you need to, and that's what Andrew did there.
Minimums are 20 cents, low investments, big reward. I've heard that somewhere before, JD. It might be on the Sky Racing World website if you look closely enough. Thanks, guys.
There might be a quote from Andrew there from this week.
I might have won something for it, so I'm pretty stoked about that. JD, did you win something?
I did not. I feel like I might be ineligible for that.
Well, I've sort of exhausted all of my conditions, if not by winning that, then by mentioning it on our podcast. So, at any rate, on a serious note, our friends at Sky Racing World, they do a tremendous job. They ran a promotion with a whole bunch of people talking about why they love Australian racing. If you're not familiar with Australian racing, that's as good a reason as any to read it and get involved. we urge you to do that, and that's why we're doing these segments, because these are good sequences with big fields. You can play a ticket for a reasonable amount of money, and you can hit while using a lot of horses. And we say that, here's what broadcasting school got me, JD. We say that going into the third leg of this sequence, and JD, you mentioned I wanted coverage in race number 7. You want coverage in race number 8.
Yes, as we have the Apache Cat Handicap, which is a mile open handicap, and we'll go through the pages here. Sosi Bon, a strong horse. Reykjavik, one of my favorites in Australia. Django Freeman, we'll talk a lot about that horse coming over from Germany. As we hit the second page of
Come on, hamster!
Here, and
Come
now,
on, hamster!
the hamster wheel is finally spinning. We had an episode where we did not have the hamster wheel spin, and that's kind of disappointing here. But
we had the hamster spin here, and we got the graphic up. JD, on a serious note, these graphics look fantastic. For those of you who don't know, JD does a lot of really cool stuff to make this show as good as it is, and I'm indebted to him for it. These are really cool graphics, and he does a nice job.
So we've got the also eligibles there. No scratchings currently, so we have a full field of 14. And Andrew's favorite time has come. I have hit the all button of glory for the first time in a while. Here's what I know. Okay, Reykjavik, one of my favorite horses in training. I tweet a lot about this horse. I love this horse. This horse hasn't won in a while, though, and has not won over a heavy going. I can't put the trust there. Django Freeman. I know I'll talk a little bit about this, and I think Andrew will touch a little bit more on this horse. Consistent, super consistent to start the career. 3 firsts, 3 seconds, won a Grade 3 in Munich, and 4 other group level events had a placing. Strong second in the Germany Derby and Hamburg at the last start. These are big races in Germany, but 320-day layoff here, going to a new circuit, running in a different direction. We'll see how it goes. Not a lot of heavy form in this race. There's not a lot of form, period, in this race. There's a lot of horses that are coming out of major double-digit defeats against, again, much tougher horses. It's tough to tell who is in a good spot here. Sosi Bon, I think, is probably the best form of the bunch, but going to be the favorite. I'm going to take a chance here. And I had very strong opinions in the first 2 legs. The only thing I can really tell you about this race is that a maximum of 14 horses will enter the starting barrier. Andrew.
Dynamite drop in, Monty. That broadcasting school's really paid off. If you're tracking Major League references out there for an over-under pool, let me know so I can maybe influence the total a little bit. At any rate, there's actually a horse I like in here a fair bit, and moves up over soft or heavy going. And that's number 13, Shot of Irish. Has won 2 in a row, maybe steps up a little bit in class, but you mentioned, JD, not a lot of recent forms signed on. I think this is a horse that may very well just be getting the point of what it's supposed to do. Probably going to be the 2nd or 3rd choice in this field. My top selection there. You mentioned number 4, Reykjavik. Stretches out to a mile 3rd off the bench, you're right. Hasn't won in a while, but won a Group 3 here last year, and a return to that form would certainly make Reykjavik a contender. And you mentioned Django Freeman as well. This is a horse we talked about a little bit in our pre-production meeting. Django Freeman is a horse that I refer to as a 2x4 horse, and I stole this from one of my very good friends in the game, Tom Amello. If you're into fan education, talk to Tom. This guy gets it a heck of a lot more than a lot of people do. A 2x4 horse can best be defined as follows. If you're playing a multi-race exotics wager, and you decide to leave this horse off your ticket, if that horse wins and you feel the need to hit yourself with a 2x4, you need to use the horse. And that's how I feel with Django Freeman, because I usually don't like playing horses in Australia coming in off of long layoffs. It's one of the trends that I've noticed. American horses win a lot more off of long layoffs than Australia horses do, or at least that's the way it seems to me. So the long layoff is a concern. Having said that, there's a lot of back class in here. You run 2nd in a Group 1 in Germany. Yes, going a different direction. Time for the Planes, Trains, and Automobiles quote, JD. You're going the wrong way! Sorry, I had to. This seems like a spot where the connections are saying, okay, he's got to run somewhere. Let's see what we have. It wouldn't surprise me if Django Freeman won by 3 or 4 lengths. It wouldn't surprise me if Django Freeman got beat by 10. But I need to have this horse on my ticket. It was the last horse that I threw into the wager. And just on the off chance, if this horse is ready to run, it's got a big shot. So 4-5-13 for me in race number 8. JD, you're hitting the all button, and this is the race in the sequence where we have the most common ground. So if we're both alive into this, our rooting interests are exactly the same. Again, team cohesion. I'd like us both to hit this thing, and we're going to see. There is a way. It's ridiculous. It's convoluted. But there is a way that we both can hit this. And if you're banking on this, it's not going to cost you a lot of money.
No, it's not, and that's a great tease, Andrew, as we head to the final race, race 9 of the sequence, the Living Legends Plate. This is a 3-year-old open handicap here, so we've got a field signed on here of 14, and we have a couple also eligibles here as we'll scroll through it quickly, because I think we're going to talk about this one for quite a while, because we do have some differing opinions in this race. So I'll start it off here, and I'll go ahead.
Oh, that's a lot of horses.
I'm 6 deep here. 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 10. Of all of those horses, I'm going to choose to talk about the 10, which would probably be the last horse any of you guys out of that selection of horses would choose to go with. Stay with me. We're getting crazy with the Cheese Whiz, folks.
I'm buckling up, JD. I've buckled up. I've fastened my seatbelt, and I'm with you on this ride, even though I'm not a fan of the horse.
Great form coming in. 2 wins and a second in her last 3. Okay. So the wins were against fillies and mares in a benchmark 64 and against 3-year-old fillies in a benchmark 70. This is open company. Okay, I understand. Still, stay with me. She's done well against open company in the past. She won a stakes race at Flemington as a 2-year-old against open company, over $100,000 stake race. There's a downside and a catch to that one as well. Do you want to know how many runners from that race have come back and won a race outside of her?
How many, JD?
If you guess 0, Andrew, you would be correct.
Ding, 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 ding.
It has to be. I mean, Flemington is a big-time track in the circuit. It has to be weird that there was a major 2-year-old stake that featured no next out winners other than the winner of the race, and not just next out winners, anytime in the last year winners.
Wow.
With that said, I like the performance and the record on the track. I don't see the breeding for a heavy surface. This is a major, major class jump. But this horse is in form. And I feel like that's better than you can say about a lot of the horses in this race. This horse is putting its nose in front of other horses at the finish line, which I believe, last time I checked, is how you win a horse race.
You play to win the game, JD. A fellow resident of Arizona would absolutely approve of that sentiment. So you're going 60. We only have one horse in common, and it's a horse that I was really excited to see run back. Number 1, High-Low, was a horse that I singled in a quaddie a couple of weeks ago and had a nightmare trip. I wish I would have thought to bring this up because we could have potentially reran it. But this horse was a front runner that got left at the gate, wound up having to circle the field, was 3rd beaten less than a length. So when I saw this horse run back, saw it was post position 1, I'm like, okay, great. Well, remember, in Australia, the post position and the barrier draw don't always match up. High-Low is going to break from barrier 15. Make no mistake, that's not a death sentence, but it does make things much harder in the event that High-Low does not break well again. If High-Low runs the race that this horse is capable of running, High-Low wins. But because of that barrier draw, I can't single the horse. I went 3 deep, and the other 2 horses that I used, JD, you don't have on your ticket despite going 6 deep. Once again, not on the same page, and I don't think we're even in the same book. Number 6, I'm really hoping I get this right. Rocca Bassarana. Did I have that right? Is it reasonably close?
Yeah, Rocca Bassarana.
Good.
You got it.
I think you can toss the last start against Group 2 foes. I think this is the right level for him third off the bench, and unlike High-Low, draws well. I'm also going to use number 11, the Astrologist, who had a very curious trip last time. The Astrologist was coming off the bench and was a front runner. It was an 8-horse field. JD, do you know where the Astrologist was for most of the race?
I do, but why don't you tell the folks?
He was last. Astrologist was last in a field of 8, and that's not what this horse wants to do. Still, ran a decent third in this horse's first start in a pretty long time. I think improvement is very logical at second asking, and because of that, needed to use the horse. So Hilo may be the most talented, but there are circumstances in place that may prevent that one from getting to the winner's enclosure. So 3 deep for me, 6 deep for JD, only one horse in common. And if you've been playing along and doing the math, that means there are only 3 combinations where either myself and JD Fox can hit this thing. What that means is, if for some warped reason you have confidence in us as your Australian Svengalis, do you know what it costs to play that ticket? At a 20-cent base wager, it costs you 6 dimes, or 2 quarters and a dime, or 2 quarters and a nickel, or 12 nickels, whatever. You can find it in your couch cushions. And I got to tell you, JD, if this hits, I'm going to laugh pretty hard. You see JD's ticket on the left at $33.60. You see mine at $36 total. I don't know. Maybe we should just put in 30 cents a piece, split our ticket, and let the chips fall where they may. What do you think?
I think a better option is for the same price of either of our tickets, you can play our combined ticket 60 times.
That sounds like a sound investment.
It's an option.
Yeah, it is. There are lots of options, and that's one of the things that we really like about Australia. If you get knocked out of the pick 4 in the first leg, you can come right back with a 20-cent pick 3. Those are a lot of fun. I've sort of mastered the art of getting knocked out in the first leg and then hitting a pick 3 of shame, as JD likes to call it. So, at any rate, though, Flemington's card, a lot of fun on Friday night. It's Australia's C in your ADW of choice. The quaddy sequence starts in race number 6. It encompasses races 6, 7, 8, and 9. However you want to get involved, make sure you get involved. This is a good product, big fields, and if you hit, chances are you're going to get paid. It doesn't take much to drive these payoffs up, especially in North American pools, where every once in a while there's a situation that you can exploit, lack of combinations in the pool, whatever. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to betting this sequence.
And we always on this show, we kind of do what we call in the business a caveman ticket. Basically we've got one ticket that has all of our opinions on it, so that's going to be an expensive ticket. But Andrew, I know for this sequence, while you're giving this ticket for the show, when you personally play it, you might go in a different direction.
I might. If you follow Ed DeRosa on Twitter, he's a big fan of this. It's the grid system where you rank horses as A's, B's, and sometimes C's. That's a good way to potentially be right on some of your strong opinions. DRF has a ticket maker tool that does a great job of this. You can access that for the Australian racing on Friday night. It's something that I would at least advise investigating. There are some times where the sequence just doesn't align for an A's and B's approach. In this sequence, I think it does, and I will be playing around in that tomorrow. Whatever tickets I play, I will be tweeting it at Andrew Champagne. If you want to play my caveman ticket, you can certainly do that. I may very well do that as well and then play a separate all-A's ticket for a little bit extra money. There are a lot of ways you can attack this sequence, and that's what we're going back to.
One of my favorite things on that ticket maker tool is the fact that you can put in your budget for your ticket and then put your opinions in. And then what it's going to do is it's going to take a bunch of factors in place, and your strongest opinions, it may, depending on what you put in, you may be punching a $3 or $4 ticket with your biggest opinions on the sequence, and then backing it with some 20-cent denomination tickets, fitting in some of your secondary choices. And that's a great way to play. And one of the things too is it's also a way that keeps you alive and invested and kind of constantly looking at things and seeing, okay, I've got 14 tickets and I need to see which one I'm doing well with. That can be fun as well to follow along versus just following in line on one ticket.
Yeah, and just for full disclosure, this wasn't an ad or anything like that. I do still do some DRF spot plays for video. I worked for them for a year and a half. This wasn't an ad. This was a genuine, this is a cool tool, and it's something to use in certain sequences that could potentially help the construction of your ticket. It's not necessarily something that'll fit with all sequences, but when it works pretty well. So I've got a $36 ticket. JD's got a ticket that's for $33 and change. Going to be a lot of fun. Starts in race number 6, Australia C, on your ADW of choice. That'll wrap things up for this week's edition of Champagne and JD. Again, if you like what you see, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll be doing this every week. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at the addresses below. We will occasionally do some special shots of Champagne and JD. I have recently uncovered an Adobe Illustrator file that I had not used in a very long time, so I'll be using that to put some tickets out as well. I was able to do that for Santa Anita over the weekend. Wasn't exactly a winning ticket, but was a lot of fun dusting that off and showing off what we can do. This is something we do for love of the game. We're not getting paid to do this. It's something that we really love doing. It's a highlight of our weeks, and it's something that we both look forward to in times where everything seems really uncertain. I mean, if you had talked to either of us 4 or 5 months ago about the Belmont being a mile and an eighth, the Kentucky Derby in September, the Preakness in October, people potentially juggling Triple Crown races with different contenders, we'd have looked at you and said you were crazy. As it turns out, that's the hand we're dealt. So we're trying to make the most of this. And we're trying to make the most of this because we genuinely love the game and we want the game to thrive. If you want to see something on this show, tweet us. We see every tweet that comes in. All we ask is that you be respectful, which you'd think wouldn't be a hard thing to do, but given these current times, it's becoming clear that that's very challenging for some people out there, especially in horse racing Twitter. So be civil, let us know what you want to see, and we'll do everything we can to make that happen. As we've mentioned, we've got a lot of good guests in the queue for the coming weeks, but with Belmont deciding to blow up the horse racing world this week, we decided to keep it pretty simple and focus on just the two of us here talking about Belmont and talking about Flemington. And I think things went really well. Hopefully we'll be celebrating a win with one of our quality tickets next week, JD.
Unpaid promotion again, since you kind of gave an unpaid, unofficial endorsement of something. I'm going to step in now.
There you go.
Assiniboia Downs is running Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday nights starting on Monday. We're going to have shots of JD at least. Maybe we'll get Champagne involved on one of them. We're going to be playing some sequences out there. It is outside of Woodbine, my favorite track in Canada, which unfortunately for you guys on the show means it's my second favorite track in North America. I love all of you guys, and I know I'm weird that I play Canada and Australia mainly, but I feel like that's what makes me an interesting companion with Mr. Naira over here. Mr.
Naira? I'm in Northern California, man. Come on. Now,
yeah.
Mr. Saratoga, given...
Okay, fair. I overstretched.
But I do not represent the opinions of people at Belmont and Aqueduct, so, I don't know. At any rate, this is a lot of fun. This is always a lot of fun. Hit the subscribe button. We're happy to have you. We're happy that you've seen our podcast, and we're always happy to hear from you on Twitter. So again, for JD Fox, I'm Andrew Champagne. We always close this show out the same way, and JD, I'll let you close it. This is important because there are states that are reopening. There are states where the economy's getting back on track. People are trying to start living some element of their normal lives, hopefully without realizing that they are not immune to the pandemic. It's not over. It's not canceled. This is not a Netflix subscription. This is not a gym membership. You can't just cancel it and act like it doesn't exist. And with that in mind, JD, hit him with the closer.
Stay off the beaches.
Take it easy, everybody.